I'm excited because I am live now and about to go live with Tracee Stanley. I'm going to be talking with Tracee Stanley, who just wrote an amazing new book, and it's called Radiant Rest. I just hear the title and I already feel soothed. Radiant Rest, Yoga Nidra for Deep Relaxation and Awakened Clarity. And we're going to specifically be talking about really more globally the healing power of deep rest, but the kind of deep rest that Tracee is really an expert on, which is Yoga Nidra. And so without further ado, so excited to join me here, fellow Shambhala author. Hi, Tracee.
Hello, how are you?
Good. I'm glad that this could work out.
Well, it's great to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I was really excited when I first messaged you because even your auto reply was so inspiring because you were on a sabbatical. And as soon as I read that and just saw, wow, wait, so to work for yourself, to have just published a book, and I know it was some months after you've done a lot of marketing, no doubt, but to just see that auto reply that just said, here, this is who you can send questions to because I'm on sabbatical, or however you worded it. But it, to me, was sort of bold in a way that at least once a day, I've thought of when am I going to get my sabbatical in this winter, and all because of you. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very necessary for us to give ourselves permission because I, spent a lot of time working in the corporate world, not even taking a vacation because I was afraid of what would happen if I actually took a vacation. What would people think if I actually left? So it feels really empowering to be able to give myself this kind of permission. And I feel like it is inspiring to other people because I know I have other friends who've all of a sudden I get their auto reply and it's like, I'm resting, I'm on sabbatical. Yes. So this needs to be a movement where we're okay with being able to put our auto reply on, that we're just not responding right now.
Yes. And you know what? Life and their lives, the world will go on, and your inner world will be all the more content, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and there's one of the things I guess that I really liked, one connection I noticed is between my book and yours, this idea of reclaiming our birthright. And I talk a lot about reclaiming our birthright to healthy pleasures in life, all pleasures. And I really like how you talk about reclaiming our birthright to rest. Tell me, I guess, a little bit about how you first reclaimed your birthright to rest, but right when you first started, I guess, getting into the practice of Yoga Nidra.
Yeah, so I was introduced to the practice of Yoga Nidra, and it wasn't actually called Yoga Nidra. The person who introduced it to me did not actually say, this is the practice of Yoga Nidra. They basically said, okay, lie down, and I'm going to guide you through a practice. And the practice was so deep and so restorative that it felt like there was something that was kind of revealed to me, that there was this place of stillness and peace that was inside of me, that wasn't something that was outside of me. It was almost like I had kind of let a lot of things dissolve unintentionally because I didn't know anything about this practice. Yeah. And what I felt was just this vibration of peace that lasted for a really long time. And so over the years, then I started to really dive in to practicing and learning more about the practice, and then understanding that it was a practice that was called Yoga Nidra. And it wasn't really, I think, until I started self-guiding myself in the practice, and then really started sharing it more widely, that I started to recognize that a lot of us hold this feeling or this belief that we actually don't deserve to rest. We also hold a fear that it's not safe to rest. And in many cases, it is not safe to rest for people in certain bodies, Black and brown bodies. It's not safe to rest in a lot of places.
Yeah. And well, share with me a little bit about how did you break down the book and the information?
People ask that question. It's interesting. And I I think it's because the way the book is broken down is because I had to start with my intention for writing it. And my intention for writing it was that I wanted people to cultivate their own relationship with the practice of rest and yoga nidra.
Mm.
I also wanted them to be able to understand the beliefs that they held, the resistance that they held to resting. So
Yeah,
for
that's
me,
huge.
so you know, as opposed to me writing a book about my experience with yoga nidra and my beliefs about rest, even though those are infused in the book, I really wanted people to own their own relationship with rest. So the way I broke the book down was really about a little bit of the science, you know, about the brain waves and
Yeah.
the sleep stages, but then really asking, what does it mean to relax?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then adding practices that help you to kind of discover where you have resistance to relaxing just in the physical body. Understanding a little bit about the rest and digest system and what it means to be in rest and digest, what it means to be in fight or flight, what it also means to hold trauma in the body. Trauma that might not even be our trauma, but could be ancestral trauma.
Right. Yes. That I think is amazing what we now understand about that intergenerational trauma, especially given to what extent people really can blame themselves so much in their day-to-day lives, not even realizing just kind of what's come before us that lives in our body.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's huge. And I'm so glad that it's being backed up by science now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that in there. There's a lot of self-inquiry. What I've noticed and in my own practice and in my own sharing of these practices with other people is that the space between, which we kind of call this liminal space, right? The space between being asleep, let's say, or being deep in the practice and then waking up. There's this place to kind of savor the space of the liminal because there is so much information that is in that space. It's a time where we can actually remember and we can process our experience. We can also remember some of the epiphanies and inspirations that come from practice. And all too often, I think that we do these practices and then we're like, okay, I got to get back to the doing, you know? And the self-inquiry questions allow you to kind of just really inquire within yourself so that you can kind of know where you're headed, where you're coming from, what you really want. And a lot of times we don't really get a chance to ask ourselves deep questions, right? So the deepest question we might ask ourselves is, who am I? Right? But there's so many other questions that we have to ask before that. So there's a lot of self-inquiry in the book. I offer not only yoga nidra practices, but practices that are preparatory to help us to begin to learn to surrender, to learn to rest a little bit more, so that we can receive the grace of yoga nidra. Because yoga nidra as a state of consciousness is not something that we can just make happen.
Yeah. And I love your description of it as a goddess, which I want to come back to, but first you reminded me of, you know, when we think of self-inquiry and these questions, I know one that I work with people a lot on, given I do a lot with relationship and intimacy and sexual health, is also like, what do I want? And on the one hand, maybe you'd think it's a basic question, but it's something that I see people having such a hard time with, because to know what I want means to know that I'm a deserving being to receive what I want and am entitled to that, whether it be in the form of rest or some other sources of well-being and connection with others. But so, yeah, I do really appreciate how you have in the book different self-inquiry practices and different meditations. And so for me, I love with your audio listening to your voice. Actually, last night in the middle of the night, the power went out, and you'd think, oh, well, you're already asleep, but I have all sorts of noise to sleep, white noise, right? Because that's telling about my busybody self. But I was like, well, I got to find some new noise, and that's when I actually listened to some more of your audio. And but I mean, what would you say for people that we are so used to the noise, like to be in silence? I know you talked a little bit about just the trauma that's held within. Have you had students in which that they just are too afraid to be in the silence of their body?
Yeah, I think to some extent that we all are afraid to be in the silence, right? Because it means that we have to partner with the unknown. You know, when we're in the silence, we're in the void. And I think a lot of times we think about the void as being something that's really scary. But if we think about the void as a place that actually holds potential, holds inspiration, holds that place that is really who we are, then we just get to surrender a little bit at a time. And sometimes that may require the help of a really good therapist, right? It doesn't mean that we have to do it all on our own, especially if we really find out that those places are scary. And, you know, I think that this is where there's like a commonality between your work and what I'm writing about in Radiant Rest, is really that I'm asking for a cultivation of a relationship with yourself, with your soul. You know, Yoga Nidra is this place where we can fall asleep to the ego and we can awaken to our soul.
I just got shivers. I love that.
And there's an intimacy in that, right? There's an intimacy that you have to develop with the silence, with the lack of noise, with the lack of doing, with the lack of, you know, not always having our awareness turned outward, but really being able to turn inward. So I'd love to hear what you think about that.
Well, I mean, it makes me think of how it's like a lot of things. There's the discomfort in the beginning of anything new and anything unfamiliar. And you do talk about also the ways in which having guided practices is how people start before you might have your own self-guided. And so that idea of you don't have to be all alone in it as you start, but then to ride the wave of some of that discomfort gets you to the other side of a peaceful place. And it's all, the relationship with self and some of the ways in which we've developed these storylines and nervous system patterns that are all not our truth. I mean, I think they're all ways to protect us, but they're all really they've blocked, I think, that inner knowing, that inner essence. And that's one of the things that I think is beautiful too, is how you talked about how Yoga Nidra it's a way to also understand that we're all connected. So yes, you're in the silence and the stillness of your body, what that might bring up, but yet there's this sense of connection to self and others. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what we I think realize when we go inward, right? Is that we're not alone. Yeah. And
so it's just the fear of how to get there and the fear of stepping into it.
Yeah. I mean, I also think it's just the understanding of who we are, right? Is that sometimes it's not until we are asked to lie down and relax or surrender that we realize, I don't know, this doesn't feel safe, or I don't want to do this, or I don't know why I can't relax, right? And then we kind of leave it at this idea that, oh, I'm not the type of person that can relax. That kind of practice is not for me. The slowing down is not for me, right? And that's where I think the self-inquiry is really helpful, because it is asking you to really inquire into why. And some of the practices in the book, because they are preparatory, they allow you to just have little tastes of what it feels like, just for a few minutes, to be able to observe. So something as simple as a body scan. And not only doing the body scan, but actually drawing the outline of your own body in a journal, and then writing, what is it that I observe? And then doing that the next day and the next day and the next day, and doing that as a 40-day practice to actually see how it changes from day to day, from moment to moment.
Yeah, it's that practice. Well, I mean, I think too of how sad that so many people feel they really only feel comfortable in their thinking mind, that spinning, and that they feel afraid, or they don't even know or understand or want to be in their body. And in my book, I talk a lot about bodyfulness, and to me, even just the word,
I love that word.
Isn't it a great one?
Yeah. What is it? What do you call bodyfulness? What is the definition?
Yeah. Well, as I talk about it and as I work with it, it's really about, it's about embodied mindfulness, but also then sort of what do we do with this information? How can we greet this information? How can we really listen, learn, and love our body's messages and express them? Because a lot of it is also about expression, not repression. Express them and to really like receive the pleasures in our body, feeling good in our body, and to share with others. Now, it doesn't mean in life, of course, that we always feel good in our bodies, but it's a method to help really regulate and ride the wave of sort of all that comes in through our senses and all of that cause and effect within and in the outside world. But it's bringing the body as a sort, recognizing it as a resource, as wise, as always really rooting for our life force energy, as opposed to the ways a lot of people have been socialized that, if you don't have a body that looks and acts and performs a certain way, if you're a certain age, if you're of a certain, income or color of your skin, then your body is marginalized and othered. So I talk about that to some extent in the book. And a lot of my growth around kind of body oppression and body marginalization has come from my work with Off the Mat Into the World and with Carrie Kelly. And I know you
Yes.
work with them. And so I just watched the panel that you did with some of the other Shambhala authors that Carrie led. I'm forgetting the title, but I want people to watch that too. What is that one?
Yeah, it was a Citizen Well meetup, and it was with Hala Corey and Kate Johnson and Michelle Cassandra Johnson. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can maybe put a link. I'll come back to the comments later, and we can put a link.
Yeah. I was able to do a live with Michelle Cassandra Johnson. Because let's just say that I'm parlaying this opportunity of writing a book with Shambhala to tap into all these other Shambhala authors that I completely respect and admire and, feel lucky to get to have a conversation with and learn from. Because for me, writing the book was for me, it felt pretty isolating. And so this for me is the fun part of getting to connect with people that, and learn how our work is complementary and how I can learn from what other people are doing. So
yeah, I feel like there's somebody at Shambhala who's very wise, because it feels like all of these books that are coming out now, they all support each other in their wisdom, although the wisdom is different. Mm-hmm. And one of the things, like I love Michelle Cassandra Johnson's work, and I am just now finding out because of the Citizen Well meetup with Carrie Kelly about Kate Johnson's work. She wrote this book called Radical Friendship, which I think right now is really important because there's so many friendships that are being strained. And as you were just talking before about the senses, it made me think about the fact that Yoga Nidra is this practice of withdrawing the senses inward so that you can re-assimilate into your true nature.
Yes. Wow. Yeah.
That your book, sorry to interrupt, but that your book is about allowing the senses so that you can be in the fullness of life.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think I also really want to recognize that to be sensual, sometimes it doesn't feel good. I mean, our senses kind of cost us, and it can be too much. And so and that's part of self-regulation strategies within bodyfulness, or what do we do with that when that happens, and that there are times when we need sense withdrawal for sure to regulate and steady ourselves. And I experimented a little bit, I talk about in the book, with the flotation tank.
Oh, I love the float tanks.
I have had a couple deep releases. At one point tears flew out that I didn't know I had, and it was like as if there wasn't enough salt water in that tank. I was adding a little more. So that there's something that's been so mysterious about that to me. But I know you bringing in the science into your book, which I've found too. People want the science. Not everybody. There's plenty of people that their lived experience and felt sense experience is enough. But then of course we live in this Western world that we want to confirm it with research. Or some people really want that. And I know there's some of that in your book as well. If you were to just sort of encapsulate that in a couple senses, what would be good to know?
I mean, I think the thing to know is really that this is a practice also that helps you to learn to self-regulate, right? Is that you get to really be aware of when you're in fight or flight and have some tools to be able to bring yourself into rest and digest mode, maybe even with something as simple as diaphragmatic breathing. The other thing that I think is important is some of the research that's been done around the brainwave states, right? Yeah. That this practice can bring you into a place of the theta and delta states. So theta being, you know, kind of this state of where we are when we're dreaming, when we're deeply relaxed, even when we're daydreaming. And a place of delta, this has been shown in some of these experiments or research studies, that a place where the brainwave state is the waves are very slow, and it really normally would mean that all external awareness has been cut off. But it's a place of deep healing, it's a place of rejuvenation, it's a place of where, you know, the immune system can get bolstered, that this state is also accessible in the practices of Yoga Nidra in a very short period of time, right?
Wow.
Where we experience these states that may take us hours to reach in a state of normal sleep. And then I think the last thing that is not necessarily scientific, but is really important, is that because we are moving through the states of consciousness with awareness, that we are weaving our consciousness through, and the consciousness is awake and aware. We're not falling asleep. That we're not doing that with vigilance, right? It's not another practice of doing. You know, Yoga Nidra is the practice of non-doing. It's a practice in a state of complete non-thought, but yet being awake to the place within you that is always at rest, this place that is eternal. And when you come back after practicing for a while, because I feel like the practice is cumulative, you do come back to the waking state with a different kind of wakefulness that allows you to just be in touch with things that are normally concealed from our view in the waking state.
Yeah.
And that makes us better humans, I feel like.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I the first time that I really was engaged in a practice of Yoga Nidra was about maybe I want to say 11 or 12 years ago, when I was going through a divorce, and just, it was like my whole life just was in upheaval. And I've never been a good sleeper or good at rest as it was, but this is where my body basically spoke up and was like, nope, something has to change. And so I started most afternoons, I did a practice, and it was through a local teacher here in Minneapolis who had an audio. And
well, let's name that teacher. Let's give.
It's Tara Cindy Sherman.
Okay, Tara Cindy Sherman.
Yeah. Tara Cindy Sherman. And I also want to say we have Betsy Weiner is on here. I know she had a comment, which I'm going to get to.
Betsy, I love Betsy. Hi, Betsy.
Oh, you guys know each other?
Yes, we know each other very well.
Oh, I love finding out who knows who. Okay, Betsy, shout out to Betsy. Love her. Can't wait to have our walk next week. So I was doing it during that time just because I needed some sort of refuge. And to your point earlier, I didn't know what was happening or why. I didn't know why I felt somehow in that 20 minutes, some sort of just ability to cope is, I guess, how I could function and survive through the rest of the day with everything going on. And so I didn't question it. I was just, whatever this is, is really such a powerful refuge for me. And then of course in life, I've sort of fallen out of it, you know, as once things get a little bit easier, then I let go of some of these practices. Yeah, I think that I tell my clients a lot of the time too, I refer to them to this, because what you had said also earlier about how fast there can be a transformation that I think happens so quickly. And in this hustle and bustle culture, people like that, right? People certainly want to feel better quick.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I feel like people who sometimes who are beginners, who've never even practiced yoga, like, you know, what we call yoga, the yoga asana, which obviously yoga is much more than that. They have really deep experiences, even sometimes in the first session, because there's no expectation, right? Of, oh, I'm doing meditation, or what is this? It's kind of like, it's very profound. That was my experience, was first time laying down and practicing yoga nidra. It was deep. And I was like, when can I do this again? And how often can I do it? And what I would say to that, because you made a point that you were doing it pretty much every day during the time of your divorce, I recommend for anyone to just commit, if they can, to 7 consecutive days of doing yoga nidra with journaling afterwards, and just see what happens. I can't tell you how many emails I get from people who have taken on the devotion to themselves to do the practice for 40 consecutive days. It literally is life-changing.
Yeah. Wow.
And
so
it's the practice.
Commit.
Yeah. And it's the practice. It's the practice that is the teacher, right? We can have a lot of great people who we like listening to and whatever else, but the practice itself is the true teacher. That is the true teacher that is going to awaken you to who you really are. So devote yourself to, you know, to the practice, because you're devoting to yourself when you do that. It's a practice of self-love. It's a practice of self-care.
That's what I was just thinking too. Some of my practices of self-care seem to be more lately practices of self-sabotage. It's like not practicing what I'm preaching so much lately, because of just, you know, I kind of can see, I'm the observer to myself as this busybody.
Well, you have a book that just came out, so it's also, you know, there's that.
Yeah, and it's been quite a year to be a psychologist. I mean, myself and my other colleagues, I know, I mean, we're all so full because people need so much support right now. And so I recognize that this is, you know, we all do, I guess, that it's unusual times. But I'm plotting the sort of getting back into the practices soon, really regularly. I wanted to, since I know there's been a couple comments, and I'm not good at multitasking with this. I can never win the question.
Neither am I. Do one thing at a time.
But I think I did see that, Betsy, you said something. I don't know if you're still here, but it was oh wait, Goddess K Kimbedi. Oh, Tracee, I'll be using your book in my yin classes coming Sunday for the extended rest time.
Yay, exciting.
All these teachers, because I know you talk in the book about you know, this book, if you're a teacher, if you're a householder, if you're a seeker, curious, that sort of different approaches.
Yeah, you know, I made an assumption that because I know for myself, I have books that I have read at different stages in my life. Yeah. You know, one stage being that of a student who wants to learn, and I'm always a student. And one stage being like, oh, I'm a householder. I have this, you know, 2 kids in the house. I've got this business. How can I fit my yoga? How can I fit my practice in? And learning for myself that it was a weaving that had to happen. It wasn't about carving out an hour and a half. It was like carving out 3 minutes and having a practice I could do in 3 minutes, and then finding another 3 minutes later, and then having another little practice that I could do before I went to bed, and one that I could do when I woke up.
Like sprinkling it in.
And yeah, just a sprinkling and a weaving. And then the other thing I also felt was that teachers may need resources and support for their own classes, right? Because we always, as teachers, we look and we read and we're like, oh, I want to, you know, teach this because it's effective. So I wanted to have a book that really spoke to as many people as possible at wherever they were in their journey without having any judgment. Because one day I might be a teacher and the next day I might have a house full of kids and not know what
Yeah.
to do for my practice. So
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that. And that somebody asked me that similar question the other day, as far as like, who really is your book for? And because I know you get feedback in especially the early stages is from publishers or editors about, I was told like books about sexual health don't sell, or make this, maybe more focused on moms, and even though a lot of the issues around having a hard time receiving pleasure and feeling guilt or shame around it, a lot, it's tends to be something that people who have been socialized as female probably could benefit from more. I've wanted it to be something for kind of all genders and non-binary, everybody to be able to find some benefit, because I want us to have the conversation together. So yeah, I think that idea of sort of, if this is where you're coming to it from, look at it this way or approach it this way is helpful for sure.
yeah, and I love that you shared that, because I do think that sometimes the feedback that you can get is, don't try to write a book for everybody. Right. Right.
Yeah.
But we need to be inclusive, and we need to think about the collective care. And I think that is really important. And it's actually one of the things that I feel like I'm seeing from the books that are coming out from Shambhala, is they are about just holding us, all of us, right? Holding all.
And I think what I love too is this idea of how, I mean, it shouldn't have to be radical, some of the things we're saying, but within this world of, kind of hustle, grind it out, profits over people, it is somehow become radical to suggest some of these things that are actually just really about our humanness and coming back into something really, it's like sacred and natural. But with, our history of capitalism and sort of do more, be more, produce more, these are radical suggestions somehow.
Yeah, and this is not new. The work of Audre Lorde, the work of the NAP ministry, Trisha Hersey. There are people that have been shouting this for a long time, and people haven't been listening.
Yeah.
I think that the difference is that the pandemic forced us to stop, and in that full stop of the lockdown, we got to really, first of all, see how exhausted we all are. We maybe even got to see how unhappy we are, and how we are using things in the external world to fill the unhappiness and to try to cover up the unhappiness. And we got to just see, if we were looking, we got to see that things needed to change in some way. So I think that now, it's the perfect time to be talking about this, and for us to be able to listen and implement these new ways of being, so that we can be more whole.
Yeah. And to your point of how there have been people doing this work, I feel really my way of understanding bodyfulness in my book is, it's really a combination of so many just ancient healing practices applied to modern day. And I know that you also talk about that in I love your book website, that idea of like, there's never been, really a better time for these ancient practices to be applied to our modern times.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a true gift.
Betsy, I noticed here you had written earlier that this is when we were talking about ancestral trauma. You said the healing of ancestral trauma experienced through these practices and with much of the self-inquiry is transformative. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, this is the biggest thing that I am hearing right now. And, since the pandemic started, really. And I don't know if it's just because the veil has become so thin. But people are much more in touch with their ancestors, much more curious about their ancestors, feel as though their ancestors are actually reaching out to hold them and support them in this time. In my Empowered Life Circle, the whole month of October is dedicated to practices on the ancestors. And this is something that we really need to be thinking about, because it is part of who we are.
Yes.
whether we like it or not.
Yeah. And then and I also think that, you know, for anybody who maybe thinks that they don't have trauma, I hate to say it, yeah, you do. I mean, we all have trauma. We're all members of the trauma club, just when we think of all the different ways that our ancestors have, you know, survived through it. And the ways that it does leave some marker on how we engage in the world and relate to ourselves. Not that it then means that we can't do anything about it, but I think to really acknowledge that, and with compassion, self-compassion, and sort of see the ways it does show up. And yeah, and to honor those, you know, that have really did the work before us to even get us to the privilege in our life today to be here.
Absolutely. And I just want to name that even if we don't know who our ancestors are, and even if we're not kind of not like, ooh, I'm not sure I'm ready for that, you know, the earth is our oldest ancestor.
Nice.
And so
yeah.
you can start with just devoting and honoring and having gratitude for the earth.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And I know you do teachings at Allyn, which is one of my favorite places to go. And I'm going to have to, next time you're there, you'll see me. I'm going to be the first to sign up.
Okay. I'm going to be there next year if things, you know, or if we're able to travel. So, yeah, Allyn is one of the most beautiful sacred lands. The traditional lands of the Allyn tribe are absolutely beautiful and sacred land.
Yeah, we need to kind of spread the message. Rest to the people, pleasure to the people, pleasure through rest. And,
yes, pleasure through rest. Absolutely.
All right, Tracee. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.